This AgVision program is made possible through the generous support of Syngenta Seeds NK brand. The results you need, the freedom to choose. And by Farms.com. Ag news, market prices, ag careers, and farm real estate. You'll find it all at Farms.com.
Well, her childhood experiences chasing steers now inspire her to use the bull metaphor for families to cut through it and discuss the tough issues that typically never get touched. That's why she calls them UndiscussaBULLS. Elaine Froese is the author of the book Planting the Seed of Hope and recently discussed the 10 tools for talking about tough issues in a webinar sponsored by FarmCenter.com. Elaine joins us today from Brandon, armed with a wrench and a banana and a message, something that it's okay to fight. Seems to me that the wrench must help keep some of the guys in the room who might typically have bolted by now, expecting these kinds of discussions to result in a group hug. What's the wrench for?
Kevin, I use a 9/16 wrench because it's the one that we commonly use on the farm and the one that gets lost. And the wrench is just to give the perspective that the only person you can really change is yourself. Elaine Froese can only change Elaine Froese. So I use the wrench to connect mostly with my male farm audiences and say, look guys, if you want to fix yourself and fix the farm, you better start with yourself first.
Okay, let's cut to the bull, if you will. What are these UndiscussaBULLS that you've developed?
I'm a speaker and a writer, Kevin, so I used a play on words about, it's like there's this big bull sitting in the middle of the living room. Everybody knows it's there and nobody wants to talk about it. And I used to get chased by a lot of steers, and so I encourage farm families to really take charge, and I use the metaphor of the bull to help them learn how to talk about tough issues. So the undiscussable things I put and fashioned on cards, and any family can do this. One of the issues might be letting go, and I just literally lay the cards out on the table when I'm coaching a family and say, well, let's talk to me about this family about letting go. And the founder has comments, and the parents and the adult son and daughter-in-law have comments. So the undiscussables are the hard things that you really need to talk about as a farm family in order to move yourself forward.
Let's touch on some of those areas under that letting go area, because that is very touchy. The whole concept of the will and succession and entitlement. Let me just give you a scenario. So I'm about to transfer the farm over to my kids. In terms of entitlement, what do I owe my kids?
Well, I think, Kevin, that's a very good question, because there's a lot of baby boomer farmers that are looking at children who have had a wonderful childhood, they've had college educations, and I've written an article on my website called What Do We Owe Our Kids and How Do We Treat the Girls? And those issues on inheritance are really hard, especially when the farm hasn't got a separate retirement plan and the farmer founder and his spouse are just totally dependent on the farm's viability and sustainability to feed their retirement needs. So that's a hard question, and I think that's one that when I'm in the room with my flip chart and with my toys, the person who's holding this bull gets to talk and without interruption. And so the bull gets squished and we talk about, you know, Dad, I'm willing to pay for the cows. I'm not expecting you to give them to me. And then Dad has this huge letdown of relief, and his shoulders drop and the stress goes out of his body and goes, you mean you're willing to pay for some of these assets? So the whole conversation about entitlement, what do we owe the girls who aren't farming, what do we owe the guys who are farming, all has to come out on the table. And I find that having family meetings and using the undiscussable cards gets that out, and usually it's a courageous conversation that is helped by an outside facilitator.
I have been involved in a lot of succession type workshops, and I'm going to stereotype for a moment here, but it seems to me it's always the men that run and hide when it comes to discussing, even broaching any difficult issue like who's going to pay for this and will I have, you know, will Mom have access to the raspberry patch? Is that your finding?
Initially it is, but I very quickly work to build trust, and I have 3 stages of resistance, and I use the picture of the iceberg, and I want people to get past the complexity of the issue. So first, there might be resistance from Dad because he just doesn't understand how we can pull pieces of the plan apart and make it more understandable. It just might be too totally overwhelming. The second piece is the emotional factor. This was my grandfather's farm. What do you mean I have to give myself permission not to be a farmer anymore? And I talk about what does a good day on the farm look like. And then the third piece of resistance is trust. Can I trust my son and daughter-in-law or my daughter to take this operation and keep it viable, because I'm depending on that viability. So once we can break the conversation down, Kevin, into pieces, then I can pull out my magic wand and say, hey, you know, this isn't a magic wand kind of process. This is a very specific process that we want to go to. And as a coach, I have different maps in terms of their ages and different cards that I use for passions to find out what their passions are. And we get a much clearer understanding about where the fear triggers are being pushed and how to get beyond that resistance. And that's the undiscussable part, is just breaking down that resistance.